I had two choices. Sit in Merle's air-conditioned parlor and listen to countless stories of sciatica, gout, and Grace Ann's tick rash, and wish I was dead, or go outside in the pistol-hot summer sun and amuse myself. Easy. I shoulder-strapped my little water canteen and checked my overall pockets for my string and my skate key. I always had a skate key. I didn't have skates, but by golly, I had a skate key. In my sugar-sweetest 5-year-old voice, I asked my mother if I could take some Vienna sausages with me. Knee-deep in the story of Clara Jean's unfortunate Tony Home permanent episode, Mom quickly said, "Yes, Debbie," and I was out of there like a bottle rocket. I swung out the back porch screen door and headed for adventure, pausing to snap off a tree switch and double knot tied my kid's sneakers. Where to go? For some reason, y'all, Merle and her husband Talis had decided to build a house out in the most god-awful pasture land of West Texas you ever saw. Only the little flickering light of Archer City, Texas, waved in the background. And it only had one tree, and that gave questionable shade and couldn't even hold a good tire swing. I talked to God about that from time to time. Why did this place have to be so desolate? I hated living in Texas, but I loved being a Texan. I won't lie, daring activities were limited. The tabletop flat outskirts of Wichita Falls were highlighted by the single stoplight in Archer City, and I decided that once and for all, I was going to walk the long distance of that old deserted pasture land about half a mile down the road. On the way, I stopped by the tiny, thin, brown streamlet that tried to run through the property. Under the glaring sun, I attached my bit of sausage to my little string and lowered it into the water like a deep-sea fisherman. At least that's how I saw myself. Naturally, I don't need to tell you that no fish would ever swim, let alone fit, into that tiny trickle of a brook. But it was the point of the exercise that mattered. I reckoned it was just a matter of time before a feisty catfish would come along. Meanwhile, I watched the cute little tadpoles swim and play like they didn't even know it was hot outside. I knew it was hot outside. Boy, did I ever. That sun was burning a hole in the top of my head. Fortunately, I had my little cotton summer hat crumpled in the front bib of my overalls. I said fare thee well to the tadpoles and headed out. A poor little tarantula was trudging across the black tar road, his little feet barely able to withstand the heat. I held out my stick, nudged his back legs with my skate key so he could crawl on, and delivered him to the grass. I named him John Beresford Tipton, the millionaire. Poured a little bit of water into an old pecan shell and moved on. In the distance, out in the middle of that godforsaken field of dry grass, tumbleweeds, rotted out peanuts, and western ragweed, I could see the destination of my afternoon adventure. There, y'all, smack dab in the middle of that pasture land sat an old abandoned boxcar. I had no idea how that train car got there, and I did not care. All I saw was a potential theatrical performance space. I stood on the road and looked longingly at the rusted boxcar, tomato paste paint that was so faded I was sure it had been involved in some cowboy wild getaway caper. There wasn't a single word written on the side of that car, only a faded heart shape painted the color of 2-day-old buttermilk. I closed my eyes and planned my performance. I figured it was time for a happy tale, where a beautiful princess was threatened by an evil king who wanted her dead. Enter the handsome knight ready to save the day. After he beat the king to a bloody pulp, he took the princess to a country tavern where they watched traveling jesters perform magnificent plays. He held her hand, and suddenly I smelled something like the tires of my mom's car. I looked down and realized that during my imagination spell, my tennis shoes had begun to melt in the blister-hot road. I felt trapped, dissolving into coal tar pitch before I even had a chance to reach stardom. I had to think fast. Two choices: either stand there and die, or peel my shoes off the goop and head for the pasture. Now, in order to cross the field and get to the boxcar, I knew the trek would involve snakes, scorpions, weevils, and heaven only knows what else. I remember smiling to myself and saying, I will make those varmints my audience, and they will be glad they were in the pasture today. With all my might, I managed to lift my little shoes out of the tar and take 2 steps forward to the gravel roadside. I almost started to cry while I stomped my foot into the gravel. Even with my positive and creative attitude, I was tired of Texas lessons of survival. There had to be some place in the world where I could play without fear of death. Well, I reckon this would have to work with, so let's go. In the quiet of an August afternoon, the sounds are incredible. Click beetles that snap like beatniks, snare chimes of the cicada, ratchet rattlers, and paper-flapping skipper moths. I closed my eyes for a minute and enjoyed the symphony, then climbed under the fence wire and marched across the weed grass and boldly climbed up in the boxcar. Let the play begin. I was in the middle of what I am sure was a damsel's stunning soliloquy when I heard a crackle sound. Of course, I was thrilled that all those critters were finding a way to applaud. However, I did see some smoke drift over the boxcar, and I knew that was not a fog effect. When I smelled cinders, I put two and two together and climbed the outside ladder, using my hat to keep my hands from burning off, and stood on top of the boxcar like a warrior princess. In the distance, just at the base of the tree line, short tangerine flames were waving like little flags. I felt excited about this new color show in the normally beige, dull as dirt stillness of Texas. Then I figured this was serious business. Quickly, I scurried down the metal ladder, jumped off the bottom rung, and landed on my knees in the gravel dirt. The critters had stopped making any noise at all. There is no silence like that in the world. The wind picked up and I felt my white blonde hair blow back with oven heat, and I just about fell over. Looking under the boxcar, I saw the ground level flames speeding toward me like a stampede. I was no longer entertained. I was downright scared. I could see the weeds lighting up like matchsticks, flamed tumbleweeds darting across the pasture like fireballs, and all I could hear was my heartbeat and the crackling wildfire getting louder and louder. I wonder if this is how life ended, and imagined myself on fire. Panic soon turned to steady determination. I was not going to be some helpless Maid Marian. I would find a way to survive this. I felt bad. That fire was sure to wipe out my slow-moving critter friends. And what was to keep the fire from wiping out all of Texas? For all of its challenges, I loved my state. I climbed back in the boxcar, grabbed my tree switch, and held it up like the sword Excalibur and called to all life forms, "Follow me, lads!" And I ran like a quarter horse across the field. Unexpectedly, the wind changed up, and I was then dashing into the wind instead of being pushed by it. I stopped up short when I heard a rolling kettle drum, turned around and saw the fire ridge, orange-red flames dancing in the sunlight. Behind the ridge, just over the mesquite trees, gunmetal storm clouds formed a chorus line, rapidly covering the trees. The wind changed again, and the rain marched steadily toward the fire. Within a jackrabbit second, the rain flushed the fire and moved toward me. As would be the case many times in my life, the heavens had opened up in a cleansing thunder of salvation. I knew in that moment that the rains had come to save Texas and me from the Grim Reaper. Behold the power of nature, I thought. God is good. Thanks, y'all.